All right, Bigfoot Society. I've got the privilege of talking to Monica Rollins tonight. She's a researcher from down in Texas. Got some really interesting things that have happened over the years. But Monica, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I've been wanting to chat with you for a while because your name does come up in some interesting things over the years. And we'll kind of chat about that. But it finally was able to work out. But you know, I gotta ask you right off the bat. You know, so we were talking before the show. You have what, about 20 years of Bigfoot research in your past?
Right? I do. Right around 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you first get involved with all of that? What was your gateway into the whole Bigfoot thing?
Well, I grew up in Northern California and I would summer in kind of a remote-ish area of Southwest Oregon. And I was fortunate enough to have a grandfather who really loved legends. He loved everything unusual and peculiar. And he really encouraged me when I started, showing interest in folklore and legends and, of course, Bigfoot, where we grew up and where we were staying. And I think that he was a believer, or at least leaned more towards that believer aspect of it. And he never discouraged us, from my brother and I, from looking into it. If we told him we saw or heard something, he believed us. And he would, bring me books or help me find things, in the libraries, because I'm from back in the day when there was no internet and you had to, go into a library and pick up a book, and your research is limited, and the stories that you could absorb are limited to whatever the local library had to offer you. So that really is the foundation, I feel, of my interest in Bigfoot. And then, of course, spending the summers like I did in Southwest Oregon, I did have some interesting things happen to me that I kind of blew off at the time. But, having been in the research for so long, I really strongly feel that there was likely Bigfoot in the vicinity more than once over the years. Now, I mean, we're talking years and years and years. So I would say maybe two encounters specifically, or three incidents come to mind over the course of those years that I'm really thinking, that I really feel like that was a Bigfoot. So that's what got me into it. And then I moved to East Texas. And one night I was watching The Legend of Boggy Creek, like one does, and realized that, hey, Fouke is not that far from me. So I researched Bigfoot in Texas, and I was surprised to learn back then that, there's a lot of sightings. I mean, you hear about Fouke, and in my mind it was an isolated incident, but in researching, because the internet at this point was still fairly young, finding out that there are just so many reports and sightings, and there were groups of people that were coming together and researching this. And I thought, well, heck, I'm going to join one of those groups. So I applied to the TBRC, and that's where my journey began.
That's awesome. So there's a lot there. So before we get into the Texas stuff, my mind is really on Southwest Oregon right now, actually, because I'm headed out there in July to, well, I don't know if this is considered Southwest, but to Oak Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of outside of Eugene. So I'm headed out there for a festival, Sasquatch Summerfest, and hopefully talk to some people. But was that around the same area, or?
It's a little bit south of there. It's I want to say it's like maybe an hour and a half south of there. It's where I was west of Roseburg, in the mountains out there between Roseburg and the coast.
That's awesome. Are you able to share the things that happened out there that you found kind of weird, or?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that I remember happening, I think this was at my youngest age, and I'm not going to pretend to know what age I was. I know I was young. We were at a neighbor's property, and we were in the literal back 40 of this property, and they had cut down some trees. We were playing on this log pile, right? Like kids do. We were climbing up to the top and rolling down. It was so funny. And we were right on the edge of a tree line. And I remember that I had crawled up to the top of this wood pile, and I had injured my foot earlier, but you know, as kids do, you're like, whatever, it's a scratch. You know, back in the 80s, nobody really cared if they got hurt. They kept playing, and your parents didn't care until the 10 o'clock news came on and asked if they knew where you were. But anyway, I was at the top of this log pile, and we were all giggling and laughing, and there were probably 5 of us there all together. And I could hear something coming, you know, towards us in the tree line. And these were pretty dense trees that were near us, right? So you can kind of see in there, but you know, I remember it was overcast, so it was a little darker in the tree line. And I could hear something coming towards us, and then we heard something growling, and then the trees started shaking. And I remember all the kids screaming. They were screaming bear. They were taken off across the field. And of course, I'm at the top of the wood stack, and I'm trying to get down without breaking my leg. And I already have an injured foot, so I can't run as fast as everybody else. And they were like they were at the farmhouse by the time I hit the first barbed wire fence. And I just remember thinking, oh my goodness. And I was, you know, running as fast as I could, just convinced I'm going to get pounced on by something. You know, not wanting to get tangled up in the barbed wire, trying to get through the fence and, you know, across the next field to get to the house. And I didn't see anything. And, you know, all of them were convinced it was bears. Anytime we had something happen to us, it was immediate bear in my cousins or our friends that were around us. But looking back on that, bears don't shake trees. You know, that sticks in my memory because I heard it coming. I heard it growling, and the trees were shaking. You know, and it wasn't like a soft back and forth like a bear scratching its back. This was a violent shake of the trees. So that's the first incident, you know, chronologically that I can remember. There was another one a few years later. We were coming back to my uncle's house. Now, the way the properties were situated, we called it the highway, but it's really just a paved 2-lane road in a sea of dirt roads, so we called it the highway. Runs east and west. And where my cousin's house is situated, they're just slightly below the highway. There's a field, and then there's a creek, and then another field, and then the mountain starts to jump up. And my grandfather had purchased the property directly across the creek from my uncle, and they had built this little metal bridge so that, you know, we could get back and forth with the vehicles. So the road that the bridge was on was elevated, I'd say 3 feet elevated, and then it would slope down to the forest floor. And again, heavily wooded, obviously, we're leading up into a mountain. And all the kids were coming from across the creek, you know, almost to the bridge, coming back towards my uncle's property. And we were all, again, just talking and laughing and joking around. Dark night, you know, it's a dirt road, and it's a hollow, basically, because there's trees overgrown on it. And we are almost to the bridge, and there is a growl we hear. And now we're walking down this road. We're maybe 10 years old, and it's ear level with us. You know, it's not like I heard something low to the ground 3 feet down. This is ear level with us. And it's growling, and we all stop. And then it comes again, louder, again, ear level with us. And again, my cousins take off running, screaming, "It's a bear, it's a bear." But, you know, we're, let's say 5 feet tall, all right? And the forest floor is 3 feet down and this is ear level with me. That's not a bear. I mean, I guess it could be if it was standing on its hind legs, but I mean, we didn't hear anything approaching us. We didn't hear any, you know, popping. I've been in the woods, you know, up around Skookum, and I've sat on the back of a truck and I listened as a bear came to me, and he was aggravated. It was pitch black. I can hear him coming. I can hear him. You can hear the huffing. You can hear the, you know, they pop their jaws when they're annoyed. I could hear the jaw pop, and I'm listening to it get, you know, progressively closer to me. So, you know, hearing that and then thinking back to my childhood, there was nothing. I think we just came up on it. Or it heard us as children talking and playing, and it was curious and came up and for whatever reason growled at us. You know, my cousins take off, my brother and I, not as athletic as my cousin, so we were bringing up the rear. You know, my poor little brother couldn't keep up, but again, scared to death. Something's going to be, you know, scrambling up on the road and chasing us across the bridge. You know, obviously it didn't, but that was the next thing that stands in my mind. And the third encounter that I can think of, I want to say I was maybe 15 at the time. And my cousin and I used to go up on, you know, the road we called the highway. And exactly a mile down the road was a little bridge, a culvert really. And we called it the bridge. And we'd run there and back just because we knew it was a mile there and a mile back, and we could, you know, keep track of how far we were running. Well, we had run down, come back. We were maybe 3/4 of the way back. And we had to stop. I had to stop. I can't run like my cousin could. And I'm winded, so I'm, you know, she's walking with me and we're talking, and you know, the mountains on the left of us is coming down to the roadside. There's a little bit of a clearing, but you know, the tree line comes pretty close to the road, and something I notice is stalking us, right? Or at least it's keeping pace with us, just inside the tree line, you know, far enough away where you can hear it, but not close enough to see it. And I notice it, and I mentioned it to my cousin, and we stop, and it stopped. And, you know, I'll take a step and stop. And we start walking again, and it starts walking again. And I don't know if my cousin heard something that I didn't hear, but she, in typical fashion, takes off, leaves me there. I'm already winded. Man, I got nothing in me. I can't run very far. And, you know, she screams bear, shoots off, leaves me behind to be murdered. And, you know, I run as far as I can. And then I'm like, if it's my time, it's my time. I got nothing. But this thing kept up with me the whole time, which is interesting. Never showed itself, always stayed in the tree line. But, you know, when I would stop, it would take a step and stop with me. I'd start going a beat later, it would start going. You know, eventually I made it home. My uncle was freaking out, thinking, of course, you know, I'm mauled on the side of the road because his daughter's screaming bear at him. But, you know, thinking back on that, you know, I can't say definitively that was a Bigfoot, but this is all Bigfoot behavior, right? Classic, in my opinion, after doing all of this research. I really feel strongly that, you know, certainly it could have been a bear, but, you know, equally it could have been a Bigfoot, in my opinion. And there are reports coming out of this county. It's in Douglas County, and there are reports out there. And the last encounter that I had there, I was 16, I want to say. I was out by myself in the front. Oh no, I take that back. That was my second encounter. This is all the same encounter, just a few days apart. So the initial one, my younger cousins and I, my cousin who was my age had gone somewhere for the summer, so it was just me and my younger cousins. And we were up pretty late. I'd say it was maybe 1 in the morning-ish. And we decided to go outside and just play, like goof around. It was a full moon. We could see really well. And we come busting out of that front door. And I remember this so clearly because my youngest cousin was ahead of me, and she was maybe 12 at the time. And she's halfway down these wooden planks that they had leading up to their front door. She's halfway down the wooden planks. My other cousin is behind me. I got one step down off the porch, and from the creek, right, because there was a dairy farm next door, and then there was like a cow horse pasture that my uncle owned, and then a barbed wire electric fence, and then his front yard and the porch that we're on. So off to the left, towards, definitely in the creek, but closer to the dairy farm, comes this howl that I have never heard before in my life. My cousins had never heard it before. They didn't know what it was because I looked at them. The hair on the back of my neck, first time in my life, it just stands straight up. And at first I thought it was a cow, which is unusual, you know, to hear a cow just baying at night, right? And it started off like a, and then it went into this full howl that lasted so long. And again, you know, my youngest cousin froze, the cousin behind me froze, and I'm looking at them and they're like, we don't know what that is. And the hair on my neck is standing up. I'm terrified. I'm like, everybody back in the house. And I remember that night, I was sleeping in one of the bedrooms. They didn't have curtains. They had this giant picture window in the bedroom. And I was afraid to go to sleep because I'm like, whatever that was down in that creek, that had some lungs. That thing was big. And if it wants to get us, that window ain't stopping anything. So I remember being very afraid to go back to sleep that night. And a couple of nights later is when I was outside by myself. It was dusk. The sun had just gone behind the mountain range. So it's still, you know, pretty light out, but the sun's not visible. And the neighbors next door were having a pool party because I remember hearing, you know, laughing and splashing and all this stuff. And they're across the field, but they were being pretty loud. And I hear that same howl, but farther down the creek. But in the same direction it came from before, but farther away. It was more faint, but I could hear it. And I just remember standing up, and I walked to the dirt road that went down, you know, across the bridge in the hollow that my grandfather owned it. And it was pitch black down there at this time. Like, you couldn't see anything. And I just remember thinking, there is no way. This is terrifying. Yeah, I was scared. I mean, I wasn't as scared as I was that first time hearing it, but I definitely remember thinking, you know, I didn't imagine that is that same sound. It's farther away now. I was thankful for that, but you know, those are the incidents that stand out in my mind.
That's some wild stuff. I bet there was a time when you were getting into research and then you remember those stories and you're like, oh my goodness, it's probably a little close. Did you ever ask your grandfather if he ever experienced anything weird in the area as well, or did that ever come up?
It didn't come up. You know, I wish I had. I really do wish that I had, you know, because he's been gone for a while now. But he was just so encouraging, and, you know, being young, and I wasn't really researching anything. It didn't even dawn on me to ask him that.
So you moved out to East Texas, and then you got involved with really the organization that would become the NAWAC, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did that all? You must have met someone or had some connection that led you into that group. How was that?
No, it was. I mean, this was back in 2002, right? So they're still fairly young. I want to say they'd only been an organization for a few years at that point. And it was the TBRC at that time. And I, again, you know, I was watching Falk, the Legend of Boggy Creek one night. And I realized, you know, heck, Falk, I mean, it's just a few hours away. That's nothing. I wonder if there's anything this far south. And that's what led me to the search that, you know, brought up all the different sightings. I remember seeing the BFRO. I mean, and all of this was new to me. I had no idea that there were Bigfoot organizations anywhere at this time. And that was very exciting to find out. And especially to find out that there were quite a few in Texas. And I reached out to the Gulf Coast organization, and I reached out to the TBRC. And the TBRC, Craig Woolheater, reached out to me first. So that's all it is they responded to me first. Wow. And he invited me to their next meeting, which was up in Dallas, which was quite a drive for me. Actually, I think it was out in Weatherford. And, or no, I take that back. It was East Texas, but it's still, I mean, it was a few hours drive for me. And I show up and they're having their little meeting in a banquet room of a steak place. And, you know, I'm a new face. Nobody knows who I am, you know, wandering in there. I brought my brother with me because, you know, I was thinking, I mean, if these people turn out to be really weird, we're leaving. And so Craig came up to me and, you know, asked who I was. And he was like, oh, okay, well, you know, we'd love to have you join and this and that. And, you know, it just blossomed from there. And I became a director within the group. First, I think we were called the Inner Circle. And then, you know, when we ended up forming the 501c3, it became a board of directors, and I was on that. I want to say I was on those until I think I left in 2010 is when I stopped participating with the TBRC.
Gotcha. And that's a gentleman I've actually haven't talked to before, Craig Woolheater. Maybe I'll talk to him someday.
He's got a ton of stories.
That's what I hear. So you have been up in Area X, correct?
Yes. The original Area X in southeast Oklahoma.
Is there anything that you remember from being able to go to that location that sticks out? Anything out of the ordinary that happened or anything weird? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yes, there was, I mean, it was pretty routine most of the time. You know, you get a wood knock here, you get a, you know, call there. My experience was not terribly consistent there. We would put game cameras out, tons of bear. I joke that we were the, you know, Texas Bear Research Association at one point because we had, I mean, I could tell you every bear within a 5-mile radius of that place at one point. But what turned around, and the one time that we had just an insane amount of activity was when we were filming a sizzle reel for a potential show, right? We were, you know, constantly getting hit up by, you know, production companies wanting to make this or that. And they actually sent a crew out to do a sizzle reel with 5 of us. And on this weekend, we just had so many crazy things happen. So many crazy things. And the only thing that was different was the camera crew. And the camera crew consisted of 2 or 3 women, and typically I'm the only woman out there. If you know, so if there's any woman presence, it's more than likely me. It might be somebody's wife for, you know, a day or two, but you know, up to that point, I would have been on most runs up there the only female. And this time we had a few other women out there, and I don't know if that had something to do with it. That's the only thing I could think that was different. And on this occasion, my husband and I, so the way Area X, are you familiar with Area X, how it's situated? Have you talked to anybody about that? No?
I mean, I know it's in southeast Oklahoma. I haven't been there, so.
Okay. So
we'll
the original Area X is a homestead that has been passed down through this family for generations. And it is surrounded by BLM and I want to say wildlife management area. So it's not something that can be developed. It's not something that people can just go buy, right? And it takes a good hour at least, you know, via goat path to get to the property off of the main road. So, I mean, you're pretty remote down in there. And because this was an old homestead, there were 3 cabins situated on it. There was a main cabin that we would stay at, and then there would be another cabin and a third one closer to the mountain, but we really didn't, at this point in time, we really didn't do much at the one that was closer to the mountain. We kind of stayed away from that one. So it was just the larger main cabin and then a smaller secondary cabin. And it was connected by a little footpath through the woods. And they weren't terribly far apart, but they were far enough apart. And the smaller of the cabins was bordered by a creek, and it had a bear fence around it. And that's important to the story. So the first night, and to be honest with you, I can't remember if what happened which night. There were 2 nights I want to say we were out there. The first night, I believe, my husband and I were on that second cabin that's surrounded by the bear fence. We were sitting there in the dark, and we can hear something just kind of low growling. But when we because we were sitting in the dark listening, we turn our lights on, and there was nothing. There was nothing around us. And I kept hearing it. It sounded almost like a plane, that low rumble of a plane flying overhead. There was no plane, because it would just stop. And then pick up again. And I was thinking, man, is that a cougar? Maybe it's a cougar. I don't know. But anytime we'd turn a light on, we're looking up in the trees, we're looking all around, didn't see anything, which was peculiar for sure. But the thing that really freaked me out while we were there happened, let's say, the second night. And we were filming with the crew, so we knew where the camera crew was. We had one guy stationed up higher on the mountain. We had one guy further down the creek with his dog. And that dog was the best dog. He was so obedient to his guy, and he would never leave his master. Like, he would not leave our man. He was always right there. Best dog I've ever met in my life. But they were farther down the creek, and the rest of us were at the main cabin. And we get a call on the radio from our guy up on top of the mountain saying, "Hey, I hear something down in the creek below me," which is where that secondary cabin is. It's the creek that runs alongside of it. And, we call out to the guy further down, and he's like, I don't hear anything. So Brian and I, and he's talked about this on his podcast, so I feel comfortable saying his name.
Brian Brown.
Brian Brown.
Yeah.
And he and I grabbed flashlights, and we're heading out there. And it's interesting because when I'm out there, I never really particularly felt the need to be armed. Right, I would carry a knife, but I wouldn't carry a gun on me. And Daryl really insisted that I take his gun, right? So, okay, I'll take your gun. He puts it on me. He puts it on me cross draw. When I'm drawing, I draw like this. I'm not used to cross draw. So he has it on my hip as a cross draw. That's important later. So I'm put the gun on. So Brian and I head over to the cabin. We're talking. We're using white lights. We're not trying to be subtle. We're doing our thing. And we get down along the back side of the fence, and we get to the creek, and we're looking up and down the creek, and there's nothing. We sit there for a minute, don't say anything. Nothing. We're not hearing anything. And I'm like, whatever he heard, I think it's gone. I don't know. Because I don't see anything. I'm not hearing anything. Brian agrees. So we turn around, and we're walking back the way we came, and we're about halfway down the fence line. And mind you, the mountain just there's maybe 10 feet, and then the mountain starts just jutting up behind this cabin. So we're in that little clear area, and we're hugging the fence line pretty close, again, using white light, talking like I'm talking now. We're not being quiet. And I hear something, and Brian hears it. There's something about halfway up the mountain starts walking. And so I shine my light up there, and you know, it's the middle of summer. It's a green wall. And I was like, I hear something up there. You hear that? And the next thing I know, this thing is just beelining it towards us down this mountain, being loud, you know, and you can see the foliage shaking. And I'm like, oh, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's a bear. Bear is a theme here. And I'm trying to get inside the bear fence, right? Let's hustle. So Brian and I are, we're walking, and we turn the corner, and this is so funny. I'm like, go. Well, I turn around to start walking backwards because I don't want to turn my back to whatever this is running at me down the mountain. And he starts running. He breezes past me, and I'm thinking, dude, like, you just triggered the predator response. Thanks. And so this thing is not slowing down. It's coming right at us. I'm freaking out. Brian's trying to open the gate to get in the fence. I'm walking backwards at this point. I'm not very close to the opening, and I'm trying to pull the gun with my right hand because I forgot it's cross draw because I'm panicking. And I just remember being so freaked out. I ripped the holster off the belt because it was Velcroed on. I ripped it off the belt, pulled the gun through the holster, and I'm backing up, like with the gun pointed at where this thing's coming down the mountain, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not shooting into the dark. Once it clears that tree line, I'm firing. And goodness, I hope I slow it down enough to get in that fence, because I don't think I'm going to drop. I'm thinking it's a bear. I'm not going to drop a bear with a handgun unless I'm really lucky with the, you know, where the bullets are striking. And I'm scared. I don't want to have to shoot. They don't know nobody around me knows what's going on. So all they're going to hear is gunfire in the dark, and they're going to freak out. And I don't want to shoot anything either. Yeah, I just don't. I don't want to shoot anything. So I'm backing up with the gun, and this thing comes down, stops just inside the tree line where you cannot see anything. And it stands there, and then it paces back and forth for a minute or two. Doesn't ever break the tree line, because again, I'm not shooting into the dark. I'm not shooting unless it breaks the tree line, right? So I still got my gun drawn on it. I'm backing up towards the gate entrance to the, you know, the bear fence around the cabin, and it just starts going back up the mountain. Slower, not, you know, tearing up the mountain like it came down the mountain. It's casually walking back up the mountain. Again, you can see the foliage moving. You can see, you know, stuff rustling. But, you know, I get inside the fence. I'm shaking. Brian's shaking. You know, we're radioing in to let the guy at the top of the mountain know, hey, you know, something's coming up towards you. Keep your eyes out. He never saw anything. I don't know that he even heard it coming down towards us. But we had to radio in, you know, there's something here. It was very dramatic. It made for great sizzle reel footage, I'm sure, but we didn't have a cameraman with us. You know, what they would have gotten on camera is me radioing in. Someone just bluff charged us down the mountain. And that was interesting. And, you know, again, to be rational, you can always say, sure, it could have been a bear, it could have been a cougar. But why would that not have broken the tree line to come towards me? Why would it have stayed in the tree, specifically hidden in that tree line, you know, and then just paced there, hidden, and then gone back up? I mean, I was out in the open. Sure, I had my gun drawn, but I was there, you know.
That whole area is wild. I've talked to a few people from, I mean, that whole area is southeast Oklahoma, but you mentioned bear a few times. Is there something that comes to mind? Like, if I was to ask, well, what's to say that it's not just bear in southeast Oklahoma in area X? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you remember that you could be like, it's definitely not all just bear?
So, you know, there are the calls. We did hear calls. You know, we would hear on occasion one calling from one side of the ridge to the other side of the ridge. You'd hear the whoops and the calls. It's pretty rocky in there along the creeks, so it's not really conducive to casting, right? To finding prints. I know that later on, after I had left the organization, people had started having sightings up in there. And these are reputable people. I believe them. I have no reason not to believe them. Saying that they saw one going from one tree to the other. And I will say that one time I saw something jump from one tree to the next, but it was so far away. I'm terrible with size. I couldn't tell you if it was a squirrel. I'll say it looked like a monkey, not an ape even necessarily. It wasn't, in my opinion, particularly large, but I saw something jumping from one tree to the next. But I can't say that it wasn't a squirrel, something a little more reasonable to believe. Up there, I've had a lot of instances. I've had a lot of weird things happen to me. I've seen some crazy things, just never seen a Bigfoot.
Yeah, and I don't want to get rabbit trailed or anything, but so I'll just say, if listeners want to, you can read Valley of the Apes by Michael Mays, and I've talked to him before, and there's some like fantastic stuff in that book, but it's like, it almost feels like there's other stuff that happens in that area, and they don't really talk about, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's other stuff going on besides just Bigfoot stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading into it.
I solidly believe that there are other cryptids out there.
Oh, really?
Not just Bigfoot. I do, and a lot of people don't like me for saying it. Especially Bigfoot people, I don't understand this. But I do believe that dogmen are out there. I believe that.
Absolutely.
For sure. I believe in just other cryptids in general, like pale crawlers, and there are Native American cryptids too, that they're still out there wandering around in the woods. Used to say that, it's not one of those. There's all kinds of stories of little people. I believe in the little people. There's Deer Woman. There's all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were talking about the stuff I put on TikTok earlier before the show. My goodness, there's some weird stuff coming. People are reporting on, I have 40 messages at least to go through. And it's just all the time. People are like, I've seen something crawling around. I saw a dog man. I've seen a little person in the Lake Texoma area. And it's just, it's weird stuff. But are you saying that you think there might be dog man around the southeast Oklahoma area?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
really?
I would believe it 100% that there were. That's definitely what I would consider a habitat for dogman.
Is that from reports you've taken, or is it just because you're looking at the habitat and you're like, totally?
I'm looking at the habitat.
Yep.
For sure. That's where I'm going to base any research, is looking at, is it somewhere that this creature could potentially be, hide? Is there a food source? Is there a water source? All the normal things that you'd be looking at. And also, I just feel really strongly that, where there are Bigfoot sightings and reports, there typically are also dogman reports. And I feel that you don't hear as much about the dogman reports, because who's going to believe somebody saying, I saw a werewolf in the woods? Who's going to believe that? It's easier to believe that there's a Bigfoot running around out there because you have the fossil records to back that up. But there are a lot of people saying they're seeing something that does look like a werewolf. And who am I to say they didn't see it? And if it's far-fetched for you to believe, that's fine. That's your problem. But I've heard enough people tell me about things. I've read enough reports that there's something behind that. And I don't think that it's a what am I trying to say? A distorted Bigfoot, a deformed Bigfoot.
Yeah, right.
I don't think that is the case all the time.
Yeah. The dogman stuff, I'm all for it. I really wish it wasn't a thing, because that freaks me out way more than the Bigfoot stuff for some reason, especially the hyena reports. Have you gotten like seen hyena, like one that looks like a hyena or hyena face? Like those are even weirder. But
So I'm so reluctant to say it, but I've been saying it a lot lately. So I did see a dog man, and the one that I saw had the hump, had that
oh
ridge.
man,
And so I didn't say anything for the longest time because, I mean, I have a reputation in this community for being very sane and rational, and I wanted to keep that reputation.
but that's where it's like people think you're crazy if you start talking about other stuff. Like that's so that doesn't make
And
sense.
I don't understand that because why? I mean, it's all, I mean, you know, when I was heavy into my research, I mean, I called it chasing shadows in the dark because that's what you're doing. You're chasing, you know, we're chasing, if I could spit that word out, chasing shadows in the dark. And, you know, at the end of the day, who's to say that a, you know, 8-foot monkey or ape is any more far-fetched than seeing a canine creature, a canid creature, you know?
Exactly.
At the end, and if it's my experience, and if you don't believe me, that's fine. You know, people don't want to believe me, and I kept quiet for a lot of years. I mean, my sighting was in 2014, and I didn't start openly talking about it until this past year.
Oh wow.
You know, because when I first reached out to a friend of mine who's a fellow researcher, they told me, "Oh, you don't know what you saw. You're misidentifying something." And I was like, "I know what I'm looking at."
That's terrible. That's why I have this podcast, so people can feel like they can talk without being told to shut up or be laughed at.
I dismissed, and that was so just insulting. Like, but I mean, it was also like, okay, well, I mean, somebody who's close to me this person is giving me this reaction. I'm not going to tell everybody that. I mean, I don't want to hear that from the masses.
Right.
You know?
So do you mind sharing, like, where it is that you saw it? And
yeah, I mean, we can talk about that. It's far-fetched. I mean, it sounds crazy to me. I mean, to me anyway, it sounds crazy because where I saw it is not a conventional area where you would think you would see one, right? Because you're thinking you're going to be in the woods. You're going to be like out in the middle of nowhere. I was in Dallas city limits when I saw it. And, you know, now it's not so far-fetched because, you know, of course, you know, you have your own encounter. You're looking into other people's, you know, in metropolitan areas aren't immune to cryptids. But I had a real hard time with, because this thing was big, trying to figure out how this thing is traversing the Metroplex and not being seen, because sure, there are creeks, but it's a pretty populated area, you know? And I feel like if this thing was just cruising down one of the main streets, we're going to have a lot more stories coming out about it, you know? And so I'm thinking, you know, are some people more in tune to see weird things? Like, because that's not the only weird thing I've seen. I've seen a lot of weird things.
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, Bigfoot research. I mean, I've seen duende. I mean, what you want to call a duende, right? A little person. I've seen ghosts. I've had a phantom car roll up on me. I've had a lot of weird things happen to me, but I never talk about it because, you know, anybody that I'm around over the last 20-something years, all they want to talk about is Bigfoot.
Right.
You know, so I mean, I'm just now coming out with, you know, these encounters and stories that I've had over the years, because when you're out looking for one thing, who's to say you're not going to see another? You're primed up already, right? You're primed up for the unexpected, the unusual to be around you. And maybe that opened you up to see other like weird things, but yeah. But anyway, my encounter, my sighting encounter happened within Dallas city limits. I mean, a real quick overview of it is I was going to pick my daughter up one night. It's about between 11 and 11:30 at night. I was turning off of a pretty major thoroughfare in Dallas into a residential area, and it's a fairly affluent area. They have quite large estates here, and it's not very well lit. And a lot of these estates have kind of park-like settings. But as I'm turning onto the road, maybe 30 yards in is a single street light, and that's the only illumination on the street, you know, for a ways. So I turn, and I hadn't even really started to accelerate when I see something out of the corner of my eye kind of running low to the ground. I thought it was a dog towards my car, and I don't accelerate because the trajectory, this thing's gonna, you know, cross in front of my car or collide with my car. So you know, I'm not trying to hurt anything. So I'm just sitting there, and it changes course and starts coming towards my car, and I'm like, what? Okay. And then I got this, this is what I have the hardest time explaining. I got this feeling wash over me, and it was, it's hard to explain. Like, it was coming at me in waves, and it was just, and I can only describe it as like evil, just evil. I have never felt anything like that before in all of my years of research and all of my years of, you know, sitting in dark woods by myself, walking down roads by myself. Like, you know, you get spooked every now and then, but I have never had just a wave of maliciousness, just pure evil feeling just hit me, just slam into me, and keeps coming almost, I mean, like waves crashing is what it was like. And I'm freaking out because of this sensation, and this thing's coming at me, and I'm turning to look, and as everything's in slow motion. I don't think this sighting wasn't very long. I'm turning to look, and in my mind, you know, I've got this feeling at me, and in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, oh my God, because as it's getting closer, I'm really starting to see what it is. I'm not looking directly at it yet, but as it gets closer, it's, instead of, you know, running, it starts kind of bounding, you know, like loping, bounding, almost jumping. And when it gets to, you know, it jumps, bounds, whatever, and lands maybe 15 feet from my passenger's side door. And it lands in a runner stance, like with one hand down and that's what I call it, like one hand down and one hand up for balance. Puts the other hand down. I want to say it started to stand up, but then crouched back down, and it crouched down, and it's looking in my driver's side door, and it's like following me with its neck, just as I'm rolling by. And the whole time in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, like, but I'm also thinking, don't look right at it, because you can't unsee that. You cannot handle that. You cannot unsee that. You know what that is. You know exactly what that is. And this whole evil feelings washing over me. And so I didn't look it right in the eyes, because people have asked me what color its eyes were. I don't know. I don't remember. I want to say they were ambery, but what I remember is the muzzle was elongated, but it was bearish. It wasn't long and pointy like a wolf's snout, but it was definitely pronounced. It was elongated, and it had the pointy ears, and it had that hyena-like hump on the back of its head. And I remember the fine hairs, like my hair, like the fine hairs were kind of lit up from the light shining on it. And I remember it was big because it was Christmas time, and there was a lawn ornament that spelled out joy, and it was like a big metal lawn ornament that it landed fairly close to. And I finally snapped to, because this thing's like, it literally like stuck its head out like a person, right? And was just like looking at me, following my car. And I snapped to, and I'm, the heck with this. So I slam on the gas, and I run every stop sign down that road. I'm afraid to look in my rearview mirror because I don't want to see it chasing me. I don't want to see that. But at the same time, I'm also just convinced that at any moment I'm going to feel it jump onto the back of my car, right? Because it's just what I felt like. I was terrified. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like they're going to find my car abandoned on the side of the road. There's going to be blood everywhere and nobody's going to know what happened to me, right? So I gun it. I don't stop for anything. I get to the end of the road, which is a little ways down. It dead ends into another street, and then there was the shopping center that my daughter worked at. So I pull in the shopping center, I turn around, so I'm facing the street that I just came from, and I'm waiting to see this. I really, in my mind, I'm convinced this thing's following me, right? And I'm like, man, I don't want to see that again. I mean, I'm terrified that it's going to come out, and my daughter's not going to be in the car yet. So that does not happen. She, eventually comes out, and in my mind, I'm like, that's the shortest way home. If I go back down that road and it's still there and she sees it too, then, it's like a corroborative story, right? Somebody else has seen it. But then I'm like, I don't want my daughter to experience, I don't want her to be terrified like I'm terrified, because she had walked down that road in the dark after work before, and so I'm like, no, I'm not going back down there. I took the long way home, would not go down that road like for the longest time. But I remember getting home that night and then, of course, getting out of and I didn't tell my daughter immediately, getting out of the car, going in the house, laying in bed. And I remember laying there in bed, still like heart pounding, scared. And I'm thinking, can that thing track me? It was close to me. It was within 15 feet of my car. It was looking at me through the window. Does it have my scent? Can it track me across town? Like, I don't know what this thing's can do. And like, am I going to come home one night and it's going to pop out of the bushes next to me? And this is running through my mind. And back then I used to run at night. Like I'd go running through our little neighborhood because it's pretty hilly and it's a good workout. And I just gotten into the habit. But after this encounter, I tried to do that. But every scrape of leaf blown across, a sidewalk, any leaves rustling the bushes, I'm terrified. Like I'm so scared. I don't want to walk outside of the ring of light of street lights. I'm terrified. And it's fascinating to me because, first of all, I didn't have the sighting anywhere near it was maybe 10 miles, 12 miles as the crow flies. I'm totally guessing from where I live, but not unreasonable for something to track you or, a habitation, circumference, from where that thing was. But 6 months later, I went back to Skookum with a big group of friends, and we're out there, we're doing our thing, of course, in the dark. We're out there at night. I'm out in the tall trees, campfire light. I have no problem walking off in the dark there. I am not scared in those woods, but I am afraid running through my neighborhood at night, which, that was a very interesting thing for me to realize. Like, oh, that's, all because of where I saw it.
But yeah, I can't imagine being in a situation where it's doing the whole, like, look down through the window, kind of like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park.
I remember it craned its neck out and was like following my cars. And that whole time, that sensations was constantly washing at me.
I appreciate you sharing that. And that would be even harder, I think, not sharing that with anyone for a few years,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told my really good friend here in Dallas, and, they were like, you don't know what you're looking at. You misidentified it. You didn't see that. And then I told my husband, and he was like, okay, well he goes, I'm not calling you a liar, but you understand that's a hard story to swallow. And I'm thinking, you know me. I'm an honest person. Like I have no need to make the story up. Like it does not benefit me in any way to make this story up. And I remember I told my very good friend up in Ohio, and she, thank God, she was like, Monica, if you said you saw that, then you saw it. I believe you. Mm-hmm. And her husband was the same way. He was freaked out. He's like, now I'm freaked out because if you said you saw it, then you saw it, and that means those things are out there. So now I'm a little freaked out because they both do Bigfoot research also.
Have you ever read this book before?
Texas Dogman? No, I haven't.
You should check it out.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's one of my buddies, Aaron D's, and there's a chapter on a incident around Dallas in it. Mm-hmm. But Yeah, it's a good read. Definitely check out Texas Dogman Triangle. So let's imagine we were in a Bigfoot museum, and there's a few of them, but we're in a random Bigfoot museum, and we are walking around looking at the different exhibits. Are there any exhibits that you could be like, oh, I'm going to be mentioned in this, or I should be mentioned in this one?
Let's see. Well, I would say if there's anything to do with the TV shows, the Monster Quest, occasionally they'll have something like that. Because, in the first season, I was in the all-female team that went out. And, that really pushed me forward in the community back in the day, which was interesting. I really feel like, the early days of Bigfoot research, and I'm talking like early 2000s, like 2000 to 2010. I was one of the very few females at that time doing research out of Texas. Really, and I don't want to say across the U.S. because there were a lot of female researchers.
Right.
But I would say something maybe like that. I would expect, maybe they might mention me, but I don't have that kind of ego. If I wasn't mentioned for anything, it'd be fine.
I would hope there's a sweet Monster Quest exhibit at a Bigfoot museum. I still have to. I haven't made it out to anyone yet, but I was hoping that would get us to Monster Quest Season 1, Episode 5. That's your episode when you and a few other female researchers went out to a site near Skookum Meadows, correct?
We went to the site of the actual Skookum cast. Yeah,
do you remember anything interesting that happened out of being in that area? You were there for a few days, right?
No, we were there for like 9 days.
Wow.
We were there for like 9 days, and it's so funny because we were there for so long, and we got like 20 minutes of film time. we got like 20 minutes of airtime for a 9-day shoot. So Doug Hychek has some really sweet B-roll of all the women wandering around Skookum Meadow looking at elk tracks and elk trail and elk beds. It was interesting. I could do a whole episode just on the production of that particular episode, our part of it anyway, because we really didn't have anything crazy happen, in my opinion. I'm very critical with anything that happens. I have to rule out, the common, and if I can't rule it out, then I can't say that it wasn't that. But we did have some women on our team that had little frogs jumping on their tent, and they were convinced that something was throwing rocks at them, and you get out and look, and it's a frog. And we did. Oh no, I take that back. Now I forgot about this. Thinking back, so while we were filming this, we had all the female researchers and we had male production crew, right? And then we ended up, that's how I met Brian Brown, and Jerry and Adams Clymer was this guy's name. So the three of them just happened to be in the area at the time, and they ended up coming over and camping down with the male production crew. So we had, for this film shoot, we had Rick Knoll, who I was pretty good friends with, and we had some camera guy. And we were separated from them. So we were up on a camp we called Hilltop, because it was the top of the nearest hill. It was awesome there. I've got some beautiful shots because you could see Mount St. Helens very clearly. There had been an avalanche or something that came down that area, or something had, like a bad snowstorm, it had sheared off the top of trees, so you could see Mount St. Helens and you could see Mount Adams. So it was awesome camping up there. But the women were separated from the men, just, you know, if anything was going to happen, they felt that it would be more than likely to happen to the women up at the top of the camp. Two of the ladies peeled off from our main group and camped about halfway down the hill, and the bulk of us were still at the flat top, the hilltop. And one night it was me and Kathy Strain and Melissa. We were sitting around the campfire just talking, right? We weren't really filming. The cameraman had to be in bed at 9:30 every night, so we weren't filming a lot at night. And something did. These were not frogs, because I saw the pebble come between Kathy and I. Something was throwing pebbles at us at the campsite. And I remember I was like, I can't explain that. I can't explain that.
That's awesome.
Unless there were hunters in the area, because the first night or the second night, a group of hunters walked into our camp while we were all in our tents, you know, because I saw the flashlights and I heard the male voices, and we were lucky. I mean, not that they meant us any harm, but you know, you never know. But we were inside of our tents, and they have no idea who's in those tents. They don't know if we've got guns. They don't know what's going on. So they came into camp. They didn't even come all the way into camp. I think when they realized that there were, you know, 3 or 4 tents there, they were like, they turned around and went back down the way they came. But there were hunters out there. They're bear grass collectors, because there's a lot of bear grass up there. And apparently that's a pretty profitable thing for florists. So people will go collect the bear grass and sell it to the floral shops. It's a long, thin, decorative grass. It just grows naturally out there.
All right. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, did you say Brian Brown? So Brian Brown, was he involved with Monster Quest?
No, he just happened to be in the area.
What?
And yeah, him and this guy named Jerry and this other guy named John had hooked up through Bigfoot forums, I guess, and they just happened to be camping that weekend. And he was talking to Kathy about it, because I didn't know him at the time. And Kathy was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to be up, you know, at Skookum." And the guy that was there, John, he lived down in Stevens, I want to say, and he knew where that site was. So they were camping at there's a campground very close to the cast site. They were camping over there, so they, you know, come over, and I want to say they moved their camp down with Rick and the camera guy. I could be misremembering that, but they joined us, so they were behind the scenes, you know, just hanging out, having a good time. And he wasn't officially involved in it, but he was there during the filming of it.
That is really cool. That is something I did not know. Very cool stuff there, for sure. So I have a few interesting questions. Over the years, did you ever hear accounts that, if they had happened to you, would probably stopped you from going out into the field to look for Bigfoot?
Yes. So there were some reports out of Texas that were pretty scary. And I'd say really any report where this creature is, you know, straight up right there in front of you, just right there. You know, it's one thing to have this encounter in a moving car, seeing this creature, but I mean, with no barriers, you know, there is a mythical creature staring you down. One of them came out of Marion County. It was an aunt of one of our members in the TBRC, and she had come home. She lived in a rural area out like close to Marshall and Jefferson, out Marion County way. And she had come home from a date pretty late, and I can't remember if he dropped her off or she had her own car, but anyway, she had to park outside of a fence, right? And there was a gate and a fence, and apparently the gate was tricky to open, and it was a barbed wire fence. We love it in Texas. Anyway, she was coming from the vehicle to the gate, you know, to go home, and Bigfoot, like, just stepped out of the bushes, right? next to her, I want to say. And she was so freaked out. She couldn't get the gate open. She got tangled up in the barbed wire trying to get, away from it and into the house. And she had scars on her legs from getting tangled up in the barbed wire. And then another one that was interesting was we called it the bow hunter. And he was a guy out in East Texas. And if I tell you which national forest I'll lie, because I can't remember if it was Angelina or Sam Houston, but it was one of the national forests out there in East Texas. And he was up in his stand and he was bow hunting. And this thing walked up out of the woods. He's like, of course, freaking out because this thing that's not supposed to exist is like walking towards his deer stand. He's frozen. He's got the arrow and it reaches up and touches the arrow and it pokes it, right? It hurts it. And I want to say it freaked out or it made a noise and then ran off. I can't remember the rest of the story. I just remember that it came up and touched his arrow. And then there was another one where a guy was hunting. He was up in a stand and he's watching these hogs and this Bigfoot comes out, and I don't remember if it was chasing the hogs or if it ambushed the hog. But anyway, the hogs and the Bigfoot collide. And this Bigfoot grabs this giant hog by the back legs and just whacks it into the tree and throws it over his shoulder and walks off. That would freak me out. I think that I would have to give it up if I were witnessing that.
I know where that I know more about that one. That's a very interesting one. We can talk off air about that. That's a wild one. Do you remember were you trying to remember timelines when the whole siege at Honubi thing happened? Were you involved with research at that point?
I want to say I was. It's been a minute. I can't remember what year it was, though.
I think that was real early 2000s, maybe like 2001. People can...
Okay, so that would have been about the time that I was getting into it here.
Okay.
And I remember all the talk about it and reading the stories. It might have been a little bit later than that because I remember going up towards Honubi with a couple of other researchers, just kind of poke around in the mountains there. There had been a sighting up in Oklahoma along a river. And we were going to check out, it turned out to be a hoax, but we were, just going up there to check out tracks and whatnot. But Honubi was the talk of the town, so to speak, at the time.
I bet.
Yeah, I've been to the Honubi conference. I've been up there to Honubi, and it is it's pretty remote. It's out there in the middle of nowhere. I can see where, there'd be a whole family of Bigfoot living in the mountain ranges out there.
Absolutely. Did you ever have any connections with the equivalent of a state or government wildlife management officer over the years and talk to them about anything Bigfoot related?
So I didn't personally, but somebody else in the TBRC did. And we have had reports come in from officers. They don't want you to say anything. In East Texas, where they were mostly coming out of, I want to say a game officer was talking to one of our members, telling him, basically, yeah, they're out there. We get reports. We're not really supposed to be reporting on it, but we get them. And then there was a police officer out near Conroe, I want to say. I can't remember if he was active or retired, but he had one digging through I want to say a burn pile in his backyard. He came out one night and this thing was digging through a burn pile he had out there. Yeah, I remember him saying that he could see it. It was kind of back towards the back of his property. I don't know how large the property was, but it was back a ways, and he was coming out his back porch, and it was back there doing whatever it was doing. But he was, yeah, I can't remember retired or active, but he was a police officer.
Is the Bigfoot part of your research, is that kind of in the past, or are you still involved present day with any Bigfoot research if you hear about it?
If I hear about it, I will go check it out. My husband does research. In fact, he was a member of the NAWAC up until this year, I want to say.
Wow.
And I've got a friend who the same. I mean, I'm still friends with people in the NAWAC, and one of them lives not far at all, maybe 5 minutes down the road from me. So, you know, if he's written a book, so people will contact him. You know, hey, I saw this. He grew up in this area, so if he hears of anything, he'll let us know, and we might wander out there and take a look at things. You know, if I get a report directly, I will go investigate it. I'll talk to you on the phone. If I have the opportunity to actually visit you in person, I will. Obviously, I'm going to want to go out and check out where this sighting took place. Hopefully it was on your property, and I can, you know, and it was fairly recently, I can get out there and do some casting, or at least take a look around and see what's going on.
Over the years, you've had the time to really look into the subject. Have you come to a point where you can say 100%, okay, Bigfoot is probably this or this?
So Bigfoot specifically, I would have to go the flesh and blood camp. I know there's a lot of people who don't want to believe that. A lot of people think they're demons, or I mean, I used to joke that Bigfoot was the alien's pet. They just let him off to use the, you know, bathroom on a road trip across space. Right. But I mean, flesh and blood, like for me, like 98% gonna go with the flesh and blood. Just, I mean, the rational part of my mind has to do that. And I can't say that they don't exist, because I saw this other creature, and if that exists, there is absolutely no reason the other thing wouldn't. But I've never witnessed it. Still gotta go though, like I said, with the nice flesh and blood for sure. Gigantopithecus, maybe, I don't know. I don't know, but flesh and blood, 98% sure.
So yeah, the way I look at it is pretty similar. Is, you know, flesh and blood, but I think like some animals that can do really weird stuff, that, how do you explain, like you know, an echidna being able to, you know, sense electrical stuff through a sensor in the front of his face. Like, there's some really weird things that animals can do. So I think if it's flesh and blood, it can do some weird stuff.
I believe that. I mean, now teleporting, you know, haunting, like inhabiting trees through portals,
controlling orbs.
You know, it's hard for me to swallow. I'm very reluctant at this stage to say, I don't believe you. Like, if somebody gives me a report, I'm very reluctant to say I don't believe you. Now, it might be more difficult for me to swallow some stories. I mean, you've got to look at the whole subject. You know, do they have a history of, you know, making things up? Do they have a, you know, not that I know anybody's medical history, but are they perhaps a little unhinged? You know, there's a lot of things you need to look at in anybody who's giving you a report. But again, I didn't have that encounter. That wasn't my encounter. It's not for me to say whether or not you're telling the truth. I mean, I just want to hear what you have to say. And that gives you an outlet, because I know how important it is when you have something strange happen to you, have the ability to just get that off your chest. It's very therapeutic to talk through things that don't make sense to you.
Absolutely, yeah. Even though, you know, I have that like personal belief myself, like I'll talk to anyone. I think we can learn something from all different sides, and a lot of it is just, you know, there's a lot of people I've talked to where at the end they'll be like, you know, I haven't slept in like 20 years. I think I can actually sleep now. So that is a lot of it for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's cathartic. It really is.
Oh, exactly. You'd mentioned earlier about, we talked about Dogman for a little bit. You'd mentioned pale crawlers too, which is really interesting. So have you gotten reports about those, or how do those work into your research?
You know, I have not gotten any reports of them. And that's something that's fairly new to me. You know, I mean, I'd say within the last year or so is when I've started, like, the reports in my purview have started amping up, right? My periphery. And I don't know what those are. I mean, honestly, I don't know what those are. And there are so many curious things out there that people are starting to report that I don't wonder. You know, there's this thing in folklore, and God bless me, I cannot remember what it's called. It's got a name, but it's basically when the masses believe enough in something, it becomes material.
It's probably a tulpa.
Yeah.
I think it's a tulpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a scary concept.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, dogmen, we see werewolves, right? We hear werewolf stories. And I mean, there have been reports of werewolves in the woods for a long time, but in recent years they've amped up. So I don't wonder if it's something similar to that. These pale crawlers, what is that? I don't know. You know, somebody starts talking about it. Maybe it wasn't something at one point, but enough people believe in it that it starts manifesting.
Exactly. We were talking off air where we're talking about the TikTok stuff. So I haven't really talked about the TikTok stuff on the podcast at all. So I have like this Bigfoot Society TikTok, and like some of it gets really big. And there's a lot of people that just send me direct reports on that platform. And Texas and Oklahoma has a lot of really weird stuff going on, especially the Lake Texoma area, which is kind of half Texas, half Oklahoma. And there's just a ton of sightings of that creature that are seen around in towns around that lake. Even, you know, even by people. There was a gentleman who contacted me who was working the train, and he saw one from the train. It's just very weird. It's kind of been labeled I guess I labeled it the Lake Texoma creature. I'm just waiting for it to show up in some Discovery or History show. I'm like,
well, if you hear another report, let me know, because you know Texoma is not far from me, and
I know now. I know a person who's there.
Yeah, if it was a recent enough sighting, I'm gonna want to go check the area out.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you were talking about, you know, the train, the conductor seeing something. I always wonder, like, they go through some pretty remote parts of the United States. Surely, there's a lot of things that they don't want to talk about because, you know, they don't want to sound crazy. But they've got to have stories. They've got to have stories.
Absolutely. So yeah, train conductors. I know you guys are listening to this podcast like crazy when you're conducting the train. So reach out to me.
Yeah, the Pacific Northwest. I really want to reach out to him because he's interested in like the Bigfoot stuff. I think I will. I want to reach out to him and be like, you've been a conductor for your whole life. Like, have you seen anything?
Oh, you know a guy who's a conductor from the Pacific Northwest? That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know him personally. He I mean, we're like Facebook friends.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me, and he's into the stuff. So I mean, again, I just like, hey, you got anything you want to share? I'd love to hear it.
You had mentioned that you saw the little people or duende, right?
I saw one in East Texas. East Texas is chock full of some weirdness.
It really is.
Some weirdness. And this one, it's a Corps of Engineers park that I used to take a lot of people to. And that is where I've had a lot of strange things happen. And that's where I saw it one night. It was pretty late at night, and I was coming back from research with a group of women, and I was in the back seat of my friend's truck, and she had an extended, it was an awesome truck. I was in the back seat, she was in the front seat with another researcher, and they were having a conversation. It was about, I don't know, like 1, 2 in the morning. It was pretty late. And we were driving towards our campsite, which was in the very, very back, it was separated out from the main camp areas, which is why I liked it. And it's surrounded by water on 3 sides. There's only one way in and out of this. And we were on our way back there, and I'm just, looking out the window while they're talking. And there's a little bit of, cut grass and then the trees. And this thing, 18 to 24 inches tall, was just walking very close to the grass, just walking along. And I happened to see it only because we were coming through a light, and it was within the lighted area. And, I noticed movement, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to see a raccoon or an armadillo or something. It's pretty common out there. And there's this little thing, like elf, dwarf, I don't know. It was dressed in like natural, like brown colors, I want to say, red and brown. I mean, it was very muted, natural colors. I know it had a hat on. It had like a very unfriendly looking face. I can tell you that. I remember it had a larger nose. It reminded me of one of the puppets from Labyrinth.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah, but very, not friendly looking at all. And he was just walking along, didn't even look at us, didn't notice us, which I'm glad for, because you don't want those things recognizing that you're recognizing them. And he didn't look over, didn't do anything, just kept walking. And I'm looking, and then I look at the women, and I'm like, do you see this? And I'm looking, I'm like, look, do you see this? And they just kind of stopped and looked at me, and they were like, they didn't see anything. And at this point, because we're driving, we've already passed it. I'm like, did you see that back there? And, they were like, oh, we're almost there, Monica. Just don't be weird. And I remember getting back to camp. I don't even know that they just said we didn't see anything and just ignore it. We got back to camp, and I was sleeping in the back of my SUV for this particular trip, because it was only a couple of nights. And I remember crawling into the back of the SUV, and I was like, please, Lord, let me go to sleep immediately, because I don't want to roll over and this thing's ugly little face is in my window looking at me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, God, I hope I don't have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, because I'm not getting out of this car. It freaked me out, because it was a duende. I mean, it was it was one of the little people, right? A folklore. And I'm thinking, I don't know why it shocked me and unnerved me so much, because heck, I'm out here looking for Bigfoot, but it did. And I just remember thinking, I just want to go to sleep, and I really hope I don't have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And that was the last night we were there. I was thinking, thank God.
Yeah, weird stuff always happens on the last night. From what it's just something about the last night that's when the weird stuff happens for me.
Right.
But, you also we had been talking earlier, so you've got a show that's just starting up, right?
I do. Over on YouTube, I've got Our Paranormal World, which is my new podcast that I'm doing. And what I'm really talking about, probably the first few episodes, is just letting everybody get to know me a little better. I'm on the Texas Front Porch platform.
Yep.
So if you look for Texas Front Porch, you'll see me. I'm doing live streams. I'm not doing pre-records. So it won't be under videos. It will be under live. But you should be able to see that. Come check me out. I've also co-hosted a few of their... like Texas Front Porch and Blondes and Booze. I've co-hosted with them. I was on with Josh Turner the other night, interviewing with him on PRT.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he invited me to come and co-host with him on Friday or Saturday nights
Wow.
because he's starting up something new. But I'm really just wanting to share all of my stories because I've had weird things happen to me from an extremely early age. And I mean, you know, I've seen ghosts. Like I said, I've had a phantom car roll up on me. I've seen unexplained misty shapes. I've seen everything but UFOs and Bigfoot, really, at the end of the day.
Wild stuff.
And we're going to be talking about that. And of course, we'll have guests on and, you know, just, you know, like we're talking now, just having a nice conversation, bouncing things off each other. Tex and Brandy were both on with me tonight, but I think typically it's going to be one or the other will be co-hosting with me.
That's awesome. That's really cool that you're going to be involved. Something with Josh Turner as well over on that platform is pretty cool as well. But
he offered. I mean, it's whether or not I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I can do it this weekend because I think he was asking me to come on tomorrow night or Saturday night. But it's Good Friday and it's Easter weekend. We got a lot of stuff planned. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
he was very generous, and he was like, he said, you know, well, if it's not this weekend, then maybe next weekend. But right. I mean, he's a really good guy. I do like him a lot.
That's what I hear. That he's a good guy. Monica, it's been really fun chatting with you. It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad we were able to finally chat. Do you mind taking a few minutes to just, you know, we did just talk about the podcast and stuff. Is there any other way that people can keep up to date with what you're doing, or, you know, how to contact you if they want to reach out to you specifically about maybe something that you were mentioning during your interview?
Sure. You can always reach out to me. I mean, you can reach out to me through Facebook. I'm very cautious with who I friend, but I believe you can still send me messages. So my Facebook is Monica Frank Rollins. I've got my maiden name in there. You can also reach me through Instagram, Monica_Rollins. I've also got Strange South Radio over there. It's another profile from a podcast I had a long time ago. I haven't set up because my podcast, Our Paranormal World, is still very new. I have to set up all of my social media posts for that, but I'll be advertising them, promoting them on all of my other platforms. So if you're following me, you'll be able to see when those roll out. And if you want to reach me by email, the best way to do that is strangesouthradio@gmail.com.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Monica. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy to talk. I really enjoyed it.